I'll never forget the day it all started. My name is Ethan, and when I was around 8 years old, I did something I'd never quite shake off. My two older brothers, Jason and Ryan, had a group of friends over at our old house. It was one of those summer afternoons when the air outside seemed to hum with possibility and danger. I'd always been the tag-along, the one who wasn't supposed to be included, but somehow managed to wedge myself into their plans. That day, their plan was to play with a Ouija board in the basement. The basement was a place I hated even before that day. It always felt wrong, like the shadows there weren't just cast by the dim overhead bulb but had lives of their own. I remember standing at the top of the stairs, holding my breath as I listened to Jason's voice calling me down. "Ethan, stop being a baby and get down here." When I finally made my way down, the board was already set up in the center of the basement floor. The group, Jason, Ryan, and their friends Mike, Trevor, and Liam, were seated around it, looking like they were part of some secret club I'd just been initiated into. Jason smirked and pushed a spot open in the circle. "Sit down, Ethan. Don't screw this up." I did as I was told, swallowing the lump in my throat. The board was old and weathered, the letters and numbers faded but legible. The planchette, a small, heart-shaped piece of wood, seemed to tremble slightly as it sat in the middle. "Let's talk to a ghost," Trevor said, his voice dripping with the kind of mockery older kids reserve for younger ones. Jason took the lead, placing his fingers on the planchette. "Is there anyone here who wants to talk to us?" At first, nothing happened. The silence in the room grew heavier, pressing down on me like a weight. Then, the planchette began to move. Slowly at first, then with more purpose. I knew none of us were moving it. I could feel the tension in everyone's fingers as we gripped the edges. "Why yes," it spelled. The air seemed to grow colder. Ryan's face went pale, but he didn't say anything. Jason, ever the bravest, asked another question. "Who are you?" The planchette moved again, spelling out EVA. None of us recognized the name, but it didn't matter. What mattered was the feeling that crept into the room, a sensation like we weren't alone anymore. The game ended not long after that. Someone knocked over the board, and Jason, pretending to be unbothered, declared it was time for pizza. I tried to push the whole thing out of my mind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me upstairs. Something had attached itself to me. For years, nothing major happened, but I always felt watched, as if there were eyes on me when I was alone. Shadows moved where they shouldn't have, and whispers filled the corners of my mind at night. It wasn't constant, but it was enough to keep me on edge. The first big incident happened when I was 14. I was standing in the bathroom, leaning against the counter as I applied eyeliner. The room was silent except for the hum of the overhead light. Then, without warning, the light started flickering. I froze, the pencil slipping from my hand and clattering to the counter. Before I could pick it up, the light above me went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. I felt a rush of air beside me, as if something had moved past at incredible speed. Then, a loud crash echoed from the hallway. "Jason?" I called out, my voice trembling. I knew he wasn't home. No one was. But I had to say something, anything, to break the silence. When I stepped into the hallway, I saw her for the first time. A girl. Or at least, what looked like a girl. Her long black hair covered most of her face, but I could see her lips twisted into a wicked grin. Her dress was white, stained with what looked like blood. And her eyes, they burned with a hatred so intense, it felt like they were cutting into my soul. I blinked, and she was gone. But the crash? That was real. The mirror at the end of the hallway had shattered, the shards glinting in the dim light. My name was scratched into the frame, jagged and uneven. That was when I knew I wasn't imagining things. Something had been unleashed that day in the basement, and it wasn't going to leave me alone. Not ever. I started noticing more. A faint whisper calling my name. Objects moving when I wasn't looking. The sensation of cold fingers brushing against my skin. The shadows that had once seemed harmless now writhed and twisted, taking shapes that defied logic. The worst part? I didn't feel scared anymore. I felt powerful. Whatever evil was, She wasn't just haunting me. She was changing me. Over time, Eva's presence grew stronger. It wasn't just about the shadows or the whispers anymore. She began appearing more frequently, always on the edge of my vision, just out of reach. Sometimes she'd be in the corner of my room when I woke up in the middle of the night, her dark silhouette barely distinguishable from the darkness itself. Other times, I'd see her reflection in windows or mirrors, watching me with those piercing eyes. But it wasn't fear that consumed me. It was curiosity, a dark, gnawing curiosity that I couldn't resist. Who was she? Why had she chosen me? And most importantly, what did she want? By the time I was 16, I stopped trying to explain her away. Eva was real as the air I breathed or the blood that pumped through my veins. And she had a voice. It started as faint murmurs, indistinct whispers in the dead of night. Over time, they became clearer, more insistent. "Ethan," she'd say, her voice low and melodic, tinged with a chilling sweetness. "Don't you want to know the truth?" The truth. That's what she promised me. She claimed to know things about me, about my family, about the world. I'd spend hours listening to her, letting her words seep into my mind like poison. She told me secrets, dark and terrible things that I couldn't unhear. One night, I asked her why she was here, why she had chosen me. Her answer was simple. "Because you're like me." At first, I didn't understand what she meant. But as the weeks passed, I began to notice changes in myself. My temper grew shorter, my thoughts darker. I found myself lashing out at people for no reason, saying cruel things just to see how they'd react. It was as if a part of me had been unlocked, a part that thrived on chaos and pain. It wasn't just my mind that changed. Weird things started happening around me, things I couldn't explain. Lights would flicker when I was angry. Objects would move on their own. Once, during an argument with Jason, a glass shattered in his hand. He looked at me like he didn't recognize me, like I was a stranger. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he shouted, cradling his bleeding hand. I didn't have an answer, but deep down, I knew it was Eva. She wasn't just haunting me anymore. She was becoming a part of me. By the time I turned 17, I had stopped fighting her altogether. Eva was no longer just a ghost. She was my ally, my confidant. She showed me how to harness the darkness, how to use it to my advantage. I learned how to bend the shadows to my will, how to manipulate the energy around me. It was intoxicating, the power she offered, but it came with a price. The more I embraced her, the more distant I became from the people around me. My relationships with Jason and Ryan deteriorated completely. They'd always been protective of me, but now they looked at me with suspicion, even fear. "You're not the same Ethan," Ryan said one day. "You've changed, and not in a good way." He wasn't wrong. I wasn't the same. I didn't want to be. The old Ethan was weak, powerless. This new version of me, I liked him better. Eva pushed me further, urging me to test my limits. She'd whisper ideas in my ear, planting seeds of destruction and chaos. I started small, pranks that bordered on cruel, small acts of defiance that left people unsettled. But it wasn't enough. I wanted more. One night, Eva showed me a vision. It was of the basement where it all began, the Ouija board still sitting in the center of the floor. "Go back," she said. "Finish what we started." The thought thrilled and terrified me. I hadn't been in that basement since the day we played with the board. The memory of it still haunted me, but now it felt like a challenge, a test of my loyalty to Eva. I waited until everyone was asleep before making my way down. The basement was just as I remembered it, damp, cold, and oppressive. The board was still there, though it was covered in a thin layer of dust. I wiped it clean and placed the planchette in the center. "Are you here?" I asked, my voice steady. The planchette moved immediately, spelling out "why yes." But this time, it wasn't just Eva. There was something else, something darker. The air grew heavy, the shadows thickened. I felt a presence behind me, but when I turned, there was nothing there. "Who are you?" I asked. The planchette moved again, spelling out a name I didn't recognize. But Eva's voice filled my head, her tone urgent and commanding. Don't trust it. It's not one of us. One of us. The words sent a shiver down my spine. What exactly had I become? I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my room, staring at the Ouija board I had brought up from the basement. Eva's words echoed in my mind. Don't trust it. It's not one of us. But what did that mean? Was there more than one presence? Was I dealing with something far beyond what I could comprehend? Eva was unusually quiet after that night. She no longer whispered to me as I lay in bed, no longer appeared in the corners of my room. Her absence left a void, a hollow emptiness that gnawed at my insides. I hadn't realized how much I'd grown to rely on her presence until it was gone. The house felt different too. The usual creaks and groans seemed louder, more menacing. Shadows moved in ways that defied logic, stretching and twisting like they were alive. I began hearing faint footsteps at odd hours, always stopping just outside my door. At first, I thought it was Jason or Ryan, but when I checked, the hallway was always empty. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the Ouija board and headed back to the basement. I needed answers, and if Eva wouldn't give them to me, I'd find them myself. The basement was colder than usual, the air thick with a musty scent that made my stomach churn. I sat cross-legged on the floor, placing the board in front of me. The planchette felt heavier this time, as if it resisted my touch. Are you here? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The planchette didn't move. I waited, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. Just as I was about to give up, it jerked suddenly, spelling out, "Why yes." Who are you? I demanded. My fear was gone, replaced by a strange sense of defiance. The planchette moved again, faster this time, in OTEVA. The words sent a chill down my spine. I tightened my grip on the planchette. What do you want? The response came quickly, "Why oh you?" My hands trembled, but I forced myself to keep going. Why? The planchette moved erratically, as if whatever was controlling it was struggling to form the words. Finally, it spelled out, DERKNESSINSID. I pulled my hands back, staring at the board in horror. Darkness inside. Was it talking about me? About Eva? Or something else entirely? The air grew colder, and I felt a presence behind me, stronger than ever before. I turned slowly, half expecting to see Eva, but it wasn't her. Standing in the shadows was a figure, tall and impossibly thin, its face obscured by darkness. Its eyes glowed faintly, like embers in a dying fire. It didn't move, but I could feel its gaze piercing through me. Who are you? I asked, my voice cracking. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it stepped closer, the floorboards creaking under its weight. I scrambled backward, my heart pounding. As it reached the edge of the light, I saw its face, or rather, the lack of one. Its features were blank, smooth like polished stone, yet its presence radiated malice, an overwhelming sense of dread that made it hard to breathe. Just as I thought it would reach me, the air around me shifted. A familiar coldness enveloped me, and I heard Eva's voice, sharp and commanding. Leave him. The figure paused, its head tilting slightly as if considering her words. Then, without warning, it dissolved into the shadows, leaving behind an oppressive silence. Eva appeared beside me, her form more solid than I'd ever seen. Her eyes burned with fury, and for the first time, I saw fear in her expression. You shouldn't have done that, she said. What was that thing? I asked, my voice barely audible. Something that shouldn't exist, she replied. Something even I can't control. Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. I realized then that whatever I had unleashed that day in the basement was far beyond my understanding. Eva had been my guide, my protector, but now I wasn't sure if even she could keep me safe. Over the next few days, Eva became more insistent. She urged me to destroy the Ouija board, to sever my connection to the forces I had summoned. But I couldn't bring myself to do it. The board was my only link to the truth, to the answers I desperately craved. The figure didn't appear again, but its presence lingered. I could feel it watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. Eva warned me repeatedly, her voice tinged with desperation. You have to let it go, Ethan. It will consume you. But I didn't listen. I couldn't. The darkness inside me had grown too strong, its pull too enticing. I had come too far to turn back now. One night, as I sat alone in my room, the Ouija board laid out before me, I made a decision. I placed my hands on the planchette and whispered, I'm ready. The board responded immediately, the planchette moving with a force that nearly tore it from my grasp. The words it spelled out were simple, yet they sent a shiver down my spine. WELCOMEBACK. The planchette glided across the board, faster than it ever had before. My hands trembled, but I didn't let go. The room around me seemed to warp and bend, the shadows crawling along the walls like living things. Eva's voice screamed in my head, a desperate plea. Stop, Ethan. You don't know what you're doing. But I couldn't stop. The pull of the darkness was too strong, its power too intoxicating. The board spelled out a single word, ASCND. Suddenly, the room went black. The air turned icy, and I felt an overwhelming pressure, as if the weight of the entire world was bearing down on me. Then came the voice, not Eva's, but something deeper, more ancient. It echoed in my mind, each word reverberating like thunder. You have summoned me, Ethan. Now, you must choose. Choose what? I managed to choke out, my voice barely audible over the deafening silence. Light or darkness? Life or power? Salvation or oblivion? Eva appeared beside me, her form flickering like a dying flame. She knelt down, her face inches from mine. For the first time, I saw tears in her eyes. Ethan, listen to me, she said, her voice soft but urgent. This isn't power. It's destruction. If you choose this path, you'll lose everything. Your family, your humanity, even your soul. Her words cut through the fog of my mind, and for a moment, I hesitated. But then the voice returned, stronger and more commanding. Do not listen to her. She is a fragment, a shadow of what you could become. You were meant for this, Ethan. Embrace it, and you will transcend. My mind raced, torn between the two voices. On one side was Eva, pleading for me to hold on to what little light I had left. On the other was the promise of ultimate power, a chance to rise above the pain and fear that had defined my life for so long. Choose, the voice demanded, or I will choose for you. I closed my eyes, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Memories flashed before me, Jason and Ryan laughing as we played video games, my parents' worried faces when I came home late, the warmth of a summer afternoon spent with friends. And then there was Eva, her presence a constant reminder of the darkness that had consumed me. Ethan, Eva whispered, her voice breaking, please. I opened my eyes and looked at her. For the first time, I saw her not as a ghost or a shadow, but as a girl, someone who had been lost, just like me. She wasn't my enemy. She was my warning. I choose light, I said, my voice steady. The darkness around me roared in defiance, a deafening cacophony that shook the very foundations of the house. The shadows writhed and lashed out, but Eva stepped in front of me, her form glowing with an inner light. She raised her hands, and the darkness recoiled, retreating like a wounded animal. The voice screamed, its fury shaking the air. You will regret this, Ethan. You cannot escape what you are. With one final surge, the darkness vanished, leaving the room in silence. The air was still, the oppressive weight lifted. Eva turned to me, her expression soft and relieved. You did it, she said. You chose life. But I could see the toll it had taken on her. Her form was fading, her edges blurring as if she were being pulled away. Eva, wait. I reached out, but my hand passed through her. Don't go. She smiled, a sad but peaceful smile. It's okay, Ethan. My purpose is fulfilled. You're free now. And with that, she was gone. The room was empty, the Ouija board lying lifeless on the floor. I picked it up and carried it to the backyard, smashing it to pieces and burying the fragments deep in the ground. Life didn't return to normal immediately. Jason and Ryan remained distant, their trust in me shattered. But I was determined to make things right. I sought help, opening up about the things I had experienced. It wasn't easy, but with time, the darkness inside me began to fade. Eva was gone, but her presence lingered in my heart. She had been my guide, my protector, and ultimately, my savior. Her final words stayed with me, a reminder of the choice I had made. And though the shadows no longer haunted me, I knew the darkness was still out there, waiting. But I also knew that I had the strength to resist it. For the first time in years, I felt truly free.